आज का भारत सिर्फ आगे नहीं बढ़ रहा, भारत खुद को नेक्स्ट लेवल पर ले जा रहा है.
Together with my friend Prime Minister Modi, who I was pleased to see again last night, we took on our bilateral relationship and raised it to its highest level ever.
We need new answers. That's why we are coming to India.
And as a citizen of Nepal, India's closest neighbor, I feel a deep sense of pride and optimism seeing this stride.
Hello and welcome. I'm Karen Anyaro and you're watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. President Donald Trump's administration warns countries to cut their business ties with Iran or face secondary sanctions as part of what it billed as economic D-Day. But the Treasury Department stopped short of actually imposing penalties. Iran pledges to fight back against expanded U.S. sanctions aimed at isolating its economy, expressing confidence that major trading partners would resist Washington's pressure campaign. The United States has removed Syria from its list of state sponsors of terrorism, a decision Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa hailed as historic and said would help the country's recovery after 14 years of civil war. A Russian former deputy foreign minister has said there might be semi-military response against UK drone factories by unknown sources over the sharing of blueprints for British-made cruise missile components. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says that Canada wants the best possible trade deal with the United States, but will not accept an agreement at any cost or on Washington's timeline after trade talks between the two countries collapsed last week. Pakistan and Iran make significant progress in talks that focused on the US-Israel war on Iran and a path to peace, Pakistan's Interior Minister says. According to the statement, talks between the two sides focused on measures to prevent further escalations and reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and an expedited termination of the conflict. China floods intensify as tens of thousands evacuate amid new typhoon threats, while another storm system moved towards Japan and Taiwan, raising concerns about further disruptions across East Asia. Meta trial turns focus to Instagram's design as youth addiction lawsuit enters its second week. The high-profile federal trial pits the state of California against Meta. The ongoing trial has drawn widespread comparison to the landmark tobacco litigation of the 1990s. And here are our top stories of this hour. We begin in Canada as Canada is striking back at the United States with counter-tariffs worth roughly $20 billion, escalating the trade war between the two neighbors. The Canadian government says the new measures will take effect on September 8th and will cover around 700 U.S. products with tariffs of 15%, 25%, and 50%. The targeted goods include American steel, aluminum, dairy products, appliances, electronics, seafood, and agricultural equipment. The move comes after Washington imposed new 50% tariffs on around $20 billion of Canadian goods, following the collapse of trade negotiations between the two countries. Ottawa says it is also introducing a $7.5 billion Canadian dollar support package to help businesses and co-workers affected by the new U.S. tariffs. Canadian officials say the measures are designed to protect domestic industries and limit the impact on Canadian consumers. The latest action marks another major escalation in the long-running trade dispute between the United States and Canada, with both sides now imposing billions of dollars in new tariffs. The counter-tariffs are set to come into force on September 8. Now, to further discuss this with us is Mitali Nikore, an economist from New Delhi. Mitali Nikore, welcome once again to NewsX World. Now, what can you tell us about these tariffs and about this ongoing economic war that is going on between Canada and the United States?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think firstly, thank you so much for having me. And I mean, I'm just very, very disappointed because if we look at the history of trade in North America, the North American Free Trade Agreement, the NAFTA, was really the foundation of free trade across the world. I mean, the countries made so much progress in linking their supply chains, in creating, unified markets, in creating free movement of goods and services. And today we've taken so many steps back. I mean, essential commodities that were being traded between the countries, value chains that had been set up in the food processing industry are particularly impacted because that will immediately impact citizens. Value chains in the pharmaceutical industry, in the energy and oil supply industry, in the auto components and automobile industries, all of these industries which had become accustomed to a regime of unified markets, today finding themselves absolutely shocked and confused. How do we trade with our neighbor?
Now, Ms. Mitali Nikore, what are we to expect from these new tariffs? And not only so, we know that the United States is not doing so well financially as the debt has been increasing. Now, how will this further affect the country? And not only the United States, but also Canada? Whether will it be positive or will it negatively affect both of these countries?
So let's take an example of soybean. Right. Soybean is one of the largest products that the US exports to pretty much any country. Another example is corn. These are two staple commodities that Canada imports from the US. Now that Canada has imposed these tariffs, the entire global market is going to say, wait, hold on a second. Soybean and corn, we can produce that. A lot of Latin American countries particularly are already producing that, and they will come and they will start to capture the Canadian market. And the US consumers, the US farmers are going to be the biggest losers in this entire equation. Not to say that Canadian industry is not impacted. Of course, Canadian exporters of whether it's maple syrup or exporters of energy products, they're all going to be impacted by the US tariffs as well. But the basic thing to understand is that the countries like US and Canada, because they were bound together under the NAFTA for so long, they allowed competitive advantage to develop. So there are certain commodities which grow cheaper in the US, some in Canada, and they trade those with each other. So those industries are going to feel these tariffs much more strongly and immediately in the short run, because you don't have, those industries necessarily in both countries.
Now, Ms. Mitali Nikore, thank you for that. Now, furthermore, we have just heard from Prime Minister Mark Carney that he stated that they chose Canada in a sense that the U.S. asked for too much and offered too little. Now with this new, I would say, yes, new tariffs that Canada will be imposing by September 8th, is there any chance that these two countries can actually come together before then and this can actually be dismantled? Or are we looking at two very strong-headed leaders that are going to follow through with what they are saying, being the U.S. saying that it is imposing 50% tariffs and now new Canadian tariffs ranging from 5% up to 50%?
So I do think that the Canadian Prime Minister has always been somebody who has a very logical head on his shoulders, and he has held out till the very end trying to negotiate. And this is absolutely a last straw for him. It has been evident in all the statements he's been making. We've been following his speeches at the G8, at the G20, at the UN, at various gatherings, at multilateral and bilateral forums across the world. And I don't think he would have done this if he had any other option. So at this point, what we're looking at is a scenario where it's going to be very difficult to get back unless the US side relents, unless the US side agrees to some of the Canadian demands. I think this is going to go through. But if they don't, then it's really going to be very difficult, even in the years ahead, to break down these barriers. So it's very easy to get the barriers up and very hard to then change that status quo. So what I would definitely say is that this is the time when diplomacy and diplomats from both sides should really come in, play that role of trade interlocutors and fight for trade facilitation and open borders, as opposed to what we are seeing right now.
Ms. Mitali Nikore, thank you so much for joining us here at NewsX World, and thank you for your profound insights on these developing stories. We now move to the U.S. as the United States is threatening sweeping secondary sanctions against countries and businesses that continue commercial dealings with Iran in a major escalation of Washington's economic pressure on Tehran. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has announced a new financial campaign aimed at cutting off Iran's remaining sources of revenue. The measures target key sectors including digital assets, technology, gold, aviation, and shipping, while also seeking the closure of international branches of Iran's bank Melli. Washington is warning that foreign banks and entities continuing to do business with Iran could face restrictions and potential exclusion from the U.S. financial system. Meanwhile, China has rejected the U.S. approach, saying its cooperation with Iran complies with international law. Beijing has also criticized sanctions as unilateral measures that could disrupt the global financial order. Meanwhile, Iranian Economy Minister Ali Madanizadeh says Tehran has a 2-year plan to withstand the new sanctions and has predicted another defeat for Washington. The developments mark a further escalation in the economic confrontation between the United States and Iran, with China now pushing back against Washington's sanctions strategy. To further discuss this with us, we are joined by Bishop Garrison, a senior fellow and adjunct professor, National Security Institute of George Mason Law in Alexandria, Virginia. Bishop Garrison, welcome once again to NewsX World. Now, I will begin by examining what is happening, and the U.S. is threatening sanctions, which China has pushed back. Now, should we expect more countries to do the same, or are they forcibly going to follow behind the U.S. and sanction Iran?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I would say, just as your last guest spoke about the U.S. Canadian trade issue that's continuing, I think you're going to see more countries actually following Canada's lead on some of this. Now, granted, some of these countries are not going to have the same economic power. They're not going to have the same GDP and in trade with the U.S. that gives them the same level of leverage in terms of how they may deal with some type of unwanted tariffs. But I think you're going to continue to see more of these countries pushing back on this type of economic threat.
Yes, Bishop Garrison, kindly stay with us as we have more developments coming in. We now move to Iran as Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with Omani counterpart Badr al-Busaidi in Tehran for talks on bilateral and regional issues. According to Iran's state-run IRNA news agency, al-Busaidi arrived in the Iranian capital as part of ongoing political consultations between the two countries. Ahead of the visit, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghei said the talks would address bilateral relations and regional issues. According to the joint statement, Omani Iranian foreign minister discussed phased framework that would provide practical and implementable basis to resume safe navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. Now joining us once again is Bishop Garrison, a senior fellow and adjunct professor in the National Security Institute of George Mason in Alexandria, Virginia. Now, Mr. George, welcome once again to Bishop Garrison, welcome once again to NewsX World. Now, with these developments that have taken place, and we have previously known that the U.S. The U.S. threatened anyone who was to come in contact or to actually have a deal behind their backs with Iran over the Strait of Hormuz would be facing U.S. retaliation. Now, what are we to make of this new agreement that is possibly taking place between Iran and Oman?
Yeah, well, Oman continues to be an ongoing ally and partner with the United States on various issues, particularly just given their positioning within the Middle East. The other part to it is we're currently at a huge argument with our second largest trade partner in Canada, and we're threatening additional sanctions with our third largest trade partner in China. The vast majority of these countries also have their own trade connections back to China, and China as of right now, has continued to support Iran, and it represents Iran's top leading trade partner. So this is a very complex situation that we have moving forward. The United States is going to have to come together on a very specific economic sanction strategy. Exactly what are the the stated goals of this overall effort, and not just looking for tactical wins on 1 and 2 accounts that could have serious repercussions on our economic strength. The president is looking for a way to take away the power of the Strait of Hormuz from Iran, but sanctions alone and threatening sanctions to many countries that continue to be our own allies and support us in this ongoing conflict are not going to bring about the type of resolution that I think they're looking for.
Thank you so much, Bishop Garrison. We also have with us Professor Gilad Hischenberger, a political psychologist at Reichman University in Israel. Now, Professor Gilad, welcome to NewsX World. Now, what does a phased framework for restoring safe navigation actually mean in practical terms? Are we to expect the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz without, I would say, the U.S. counterparts actually being involved in it?
Well, I think it's important, first of all, to note the very dramatic change that has taken place over the past few weeks. We can see it in rhetoric and tone, and in the actual acts that take place on the ground. A few weeks ago, it seemed like President Trump was ready to capitulate and completely accept all of Tehran's demands just to be able to deal with internal pressure and with the economic pressure emanating from rising oil prices. But now it seems that the U.S. has found a way to get oil out of Hormuz, even during these turbulent times, even under pressure. That has stabilized the market. And at the same time, the U.S. is also increasing its blockade and economic sanctions against Iran. These seem to be highly effective. If we listen to what is happening in Iran, the economic pressures are mounting. That is leading to instability and likely will lead to instability in Tehran. And Tehran is desperate to find a way out of this. This is what we're seeing right now in the talks with Pakistan. However, at the same time, we don't see the Iranian leadership willing to make any compromises. So it will be interesting to see whether this diplomatic route will eventually yield anything.
Now you have just mentioned that we now move with more developments as Iran says it has conveyed its condition on the Strait of Hormuz to Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir during his visit to Tehran. According to the Iranian source close to negotiating team, Munir was not carrying a warning or threat from the United States, but was instead trying to create space for negotiations between the sides. The source says Iran's position was clearly communicated to Pakistan, including a demand for Washington to return the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. Iran said implementation of the memorandum's provision, including a clause linked to arrangements regarding the Strait of Hormuz, is among its key conditions. The Strait of Hormuz remains a critical global energy route, with tensions around the waterway rising amid ongoing confrontation between Tehran and Washington. Pakistan is now expected to relay Iran's position to the United States as diplomatic efforts continue. Now, we are joined once again by Professor Gilad Hischenberger, a political psychologist in Reichman University in Israel. Professor Gilad, welcome once again as we continue to actually discuss what is currently taking place. Now, my first question would be that we are prominently, I would say more than often now, seeing Pakistan being the mediator between the U.S. and Iran, while previously it was Oman. Now, why do you think that is? Is it because of the threats that I would say the United States President Donald Trump had issued to Oman during the discussions, while it was in discussions with Iran concerning the Strait of Hormuz?
Yes, it is possible that the threats on Oman played a role here, but we need to remember that both Pakistan and Oman have been involved in diplomacy and negotiations between the U.S. And Iran previously. The main question is, what is the Iranian strategy? And I think it's important that we remember that the Straits of Hormuz are an international waterway, and they were not under Iranian sovereignty in any period in history. But right now, Iran is trying to benefit from the current conflict and turn it into a sovereign area of Iran, which of course the U.S. is opposed to. And I think that it's trying to see whether it can gain anything through diplomacy via Pakistan.
Now, could Islamabad become the bridge that brings Washington and Tehran back to direct negotiations?
I'm highly skeptical of that. I think that we do need to give negotiations a chance. I think Pakistan is a relatively odd country for diplomacy. It itself is a fundamentalist, non-democratic country, and I don't see how they are going to be the ones to bring to a diplomatic breakthrough. But we need to keep our hopes up, because the alternative, of course, is something nobody wants.
Professor Gilad, it has been a pleasure having you here at NewsX World, and thank you for your profound insights on all of these stories. We now move as the sons of jailed former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan have raised fresh concerns over their father's health and his conditions in prison. Qasim and Suleiman Khan spoke at a press conference alongside PTI representative Zulfi Bukhari and international human rights lawyer Jared Genser. Imran Khan, who has been in prison since August 2023, was recently taken from Adiala jail to hospital for medical checks after Pakistan's Supreme Court ordered an examination amid concerns over his deteriorating health. He was later returned to prison. His sons say that they have not been able to meet their father for years. They say their visa applications have made no progress, while phone calls with Khan have become irregular, brief, and they claim often monitored. Qasim Khan said his father remains mentally strong, but warned that his age and treatment are taking physical toll. The Pakistani government has rejected allegations of medical neglect and mistreatment, saying Khan has received regular medical examination and access to health care. The dispute over Khan's health and access to treatment continues to fuel pressure on Pakistani's government. Now, to discuss this further, we are joined by Fakhar Yousafzai, a Pakistani journalist in Islamabad. Fakhar Yousafzai, what can you tell us about these developments that are currently taking place in Pakistan?
Thank you very much, Karen. Actually, Mr. Khan is behind the bar from almost more than 3 years in Adiala near to Islamabad. And the most critical thing, which is the news we are receiving regarding Imran Khan, that is health. And nobody is allowed to meet him, especially Imran Khan's sisters. They are struggling from last 1.5 years. And last time in Pakistan Institute of Medical Sciences, the government allowed our sister, Dr. Noreen Khan, and she met for 10 minutes to Imran Khan. As well as their two sons, Suleiman and Qasim Khan, is concerned. Of course, they are living in UK, and they have so many concerns about their father because he is not getting the free trial from the court, as well as meeting with their lawyers, with their party people in jail, as well as their family. And they are, he is not allowing, the government is not allowing him to talk to their son. Actually, those orders given by the courts to once or twice a week, you can call to your two sons who's living abroad. But I'm really sorry for that the government, I think so, denying all these things which is ordered by the Supreme Court of Pakistan a couple of weeks ago, and they ordered to the federal government in Islamabad that Imran Khan will be stayed in a private hospital in Islamabad for up to 16th of September. The next hearing was on the 16th, and after that you can give us the report about the Imran Khan health. But I think so when the government is concerned, as well as the government is concerned, they bring Imran Khan to the PIMS, not to the Shifa International in Islamabad. And his family doctor, Dr. Faisal Sultan, was waiting in the private hospital, and his sister, Dr. Noreen Khan, was waiting in the parking area of the PIMS in Islamabad. I think this is the unfortunate situation, which is Imran Khan, I think so, receiving the 21 word former captains written a letter again to the Prime Minister of Pakistan regarding the health concern of Mr. Khan in Adiala jail.
Fakhar Yousafzai, thank you so much for the updated insights on that. We now move with more developments as the trial of Juan Kefe D. Davis, the only man charged in the murder of rap icon Tupac Shakur, has entered its second week in Las Vegas. Davis has pleaded not guilty to the 1996 killing. Prosecutors allege Davis helped orchestrate the attack after confrontation involving his nephew Orlando Baby Lane Anderson and Tupac's entourage at the MGM Grand earlier that night. Tupac and Death Row Records boss Suge Knight were later traveling in a BMW when a white Cadillac pulled alongside them on Las Vegas Flamingo Road. Gunfire erupted, killing Tupac 6 days later. A key focus of the trial is now Davis's own words. Jurors have heard recordings from interviews conducted years before his arrest, including a 2008 police interview in which Davis discussed providing the gun allegedly used in the shooting. On Monday, prosecutors also presented recordings from a 2017 documentary interview. Michael Dorsey, a producer who worked on the documentary, testified that he recorded additional audio from Davis, including material that was not included in the final program. In those recordings, Davis discussed the MGM fight, his nephew Orlando Anderson, the search for Suge Knight, and his relationship with Sean Puffy Combs. Davis also described his group traveling to Club 662 looking for Knight and others following the MGM confrontation. The defense, however, is challenging the reliability of those accounts. Attorney Michael Saft argues Davis exaggerated his involvement over the years to make money, promote books and television appearances, and build his public profile. The defense has also questioned Dorsey's research, his reliance on material supplied by former LAPD detective Greg Carding, the lack of physical evidence directly connecting Davis to the shooting. Prosecutors, meanwhile, are highlighting details they saw Davis knew that were not publicly available at the time. The jury will ultimately have to decide whether prosecutors have proved Davis's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Slovak police say they have foiled a planned arson attack on factory producing unmanned aerial systems in eastern Slovakia. 3 foreign nationals have been detained in connection to the alleged plot. 2 suspects were arrested in Slovakia, while a third was detained in Germany under a European arrest warrant. Police say the attack was stopped before any damage or injuries could occur. Investigators reportedly seized a large quantity of incendiary material, along with tools, mobile phones, a camera, and a handwritten plan. Authorities say around 70 people were inside the facility at the time of the attack. The attack was allegedly being prepared. The factory itself has not been identified, and police have also withheld its precise location. The suspects have been charged with public endangerment allegedly committed on commission. However, police have not revealed who may have commissioned the attack or what the motive was. The nationalities of the 3 suspects have also not been disclosed. The case is particularly sensitive because Slovakia is a NATO and European Union member bordering Ukraine, where drones have become a major part of the ongoing war. The targeted facility was reportedly involved in producing unmanned aerial systems, making it a potentially significant industrial and security target. Slovak authorities say intelligence from the country's security and military intelligence services helped investigators uncover the alleged plot. The arrests also highlight the growing concern across Europe over possible sabotage operations targeting strategically important infrastructure and defense-related facilities. But there is currently no public evidence from Slovak authorities linking this specific case to Russia or any other foreign government. The investigation remains ongoing, with authorities now seeking to establish the suspects' individual roles, the intended timing of the attack, and most importantly, who allegedly ordered it. And that is all we have time for at this hour. Stay tuned to NewsX World for more news updates from around the world. We'll be right back.